Looks like we're live. Um, Back with another episode of the Unstuck Sessions podcast slash live stream. Um, I've been super stacked. I've been really, really busy, and so it feels good to be able to sit back down and just kind of circle back and touch base with y'all. And one of the things I wanted to touch base with, and if you follow me on Facebook, one of the thing I discussed this morning uh, was really pertaining to dealing with imposter syndrome, especially when I do have some accomplishments in my personal world and how I'm dealing with it because it's not always achieving the goal isn't always doesn't always leave you with the best feelings. And so that's kind of what I'm going to discuss today. It's going to be a little bit unstructured. I do have a little bit of a script I want to go off of, but it's going to be pretty much an unstructured conversation. So that's what I have on today's episode. I will get to you guys after the intro. Peace. Welcome back to the Unstuck Sessions, where we discuss getting unstuck with business owners. And getting unstuck can mean a variety of different things. Sometimes you've reached kind of an impasse with your marketing. Sometimes you have ideas that aren't fully digested that you need to work through. And so the Unstuck Sessions is kind of my place where I, you know, discuss ways I get around little bits of ideas that aren't fully fleshed out and other sticking points I encounter in my business. If you're interested to set up a sticking points meeting where we talk about your sticking points and maybe come up with a couple of solutions to get you moving forward, um, I'm going to drop my email address in here and we can always get together and discuss it. Or if you're looking to be a guest on the podcast to discuss things that sticking points you may have overcome, or if you want to do it actually in real time and unpack some of your stuff, I would love to have you as a guest. So I'm gonna drop the email address right there. Hit me up at mail@isellwords.net and schedule consultation, and hopefully it can either turn into a podcast episode or even a private consultation. So that's what I got today. um, this morning I was kind of compelled to, because I don't really talk my own ish out here. I really don't. It's something that I'm not necessarily comfortable in doing because sometimes I have a tough time dealing with when something goes well or something goes right. I'm always in that mode of figuring out when the other shoe is going to drop or not necessarily believing that I'm 100% deserving of it. And I wanted to get out in front of it and create a Facebook post, a public one, that basically talks about some of the things that I've accomplished over the last couple of months, because I've been working really hard over the last couple of months. One of the things is I've been involved with the Bellevue, Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, and kind of helping with a couple of different media projects and things along those lines. And there's a big one that we're working on that's going to be coming up, and I'll make an announcement here in the next couple of days on my Facebook page. But it's something that we've really been working on, and I'm still kind of neck deep in it. But I managed to have some great outcomes, and I'm accepting a position on the board of directors with the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, which is a pretty big deal for me. It's kind of antithetical. It's kind of the antithesis of how I normally think. So I'm not normally a public person, and it's forcing me into a role where I'm going to have to be a little bit more public and socialize. And so I'm dealing with some of the anxiety that comes with that, which is really strong. My best foot forward. And the other side is I'm sick of these internet. All right. It looks like we're back. Having internet issues here. Another thing that is going on is, I've been working with me and Mo, my business partner, with our training business. We've been working to secure a permanent location, and we got one, and moved in January, and have really been spending the last couple of months making the connections and getting things built out. And so we have a fully functioning basketball training facility that we bootstrapped and had some help with, some extended family. I call them the CMA extended family. Um, through just even asking people for some help with different things that we needed to get done. And so that is an accomplishment. And for me, it's not always, I'm not really comfortable bigging myself up or talking about how great things are because you constantly, and this goes back to the discussions that we were having about imposter syndrome, you constantly are waiting for the other shoe to drop or for all this, or when you do make a mistake, feeling like that mistake is the end of the road for you and it's time to abandon ship. And that's one of the issues I struggle with, and that's why it's a hard thing for me at times to really embrace when something goes right or when my efforts pay off. um, and so that's one of the struggles. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily see that with successful people or people that front like they're successful online. Um, you never really see the internal struggles that they deal with because, on one hand, you have people that are really, really super successful, but don't talk about it and don't brag on their work or don't show their work all the time. And then on the other hand, you have people who pretend to be successful in something, but really don't have any success, but have all the confidence in the world because they don't really have anything that, they don't really care. They feel like everything that they've done, they deserved, whether it's earned or not. And so those are the extremes that you see online. And a lot of times when there's somebody trying to hard sell you something, maybe they're trying to rope you into a course or sell a book to you, um, that fake confidence, or it's real confidence. I don't want to say fake confidence. It's real confidence that's not really supported by anything. It's undeserved confidence. If they're trying to sell you something, they're very confident in the product that they're selling you. Now, they can't speak to its efficacy because if it fails, then it's on you. It's not the product that they sold you. And so that's one of the things that I struggle with. I don't want to come off and, you know, be exposed as a fake and all the other stuff. And it's ridiculous because I haven't really done anything to warrant that. I'm my hardest critic, and I put a lot of uh, demands on myself for different things. And so I'm gonna mess with this light here. I put a lot of demands on myself to do different things. And so as a result, um, when I create something, I've gone over it 7, 8, 9 times to make sure it's perfect. And even when, if there's a grammatical error or something in there, that's really like it sends me kind of spiraling a little bit because I checked this 1,000 times and it's still wrong. What about the other stuff? And so that's the challenge that I constantly kind of deal with. And, I've done podcasts and live streams about the imposter syndrome. And still, my best strategy for dealing with imposter syndrome is doing exactly what my negative inner critic tells me I can't do. Like if it's casting a bunch of doubt on specifically going in with the chamber and being on the board of directors and being a little bit more public and the stuff that I do, then I lean into it 100% and say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna try it and see if it works." That's the way I handle it. There's no mantras or there's no um, reflections or anything like that. There's no woo woo that's attached to it. It's if my inner voice tells me I can't do it, then I try to prove my inner voice wrong, and that's been pretty beneficial for me as a person that owns two businesses um, and is growing both of them at the same time, which I do not advise for anybody. Don't advise it at all. But it helps when you have, very strong partnerships and relationships. My wife Brandy's been phenomenal with this growth path. My business partner with Coach Mo Athletics, Coach Mo has been phenomenal in helping out in the areas that I'm not really great at. And so It helps when you have that base underneath you, so that you can kind of step out on the ledge and try new things. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. My biggest problem is when it doesn't work, how to take that lump and not fall in despair when something doesn't work, and start questioning all the things that I have done that have been successful. That's a challenge. And it's not necessarily defeated with success. That's the tough part about this entire thing. It ain't. I have to take my glasses off. I'm getting too much light on them. It's not necessarily easy. Success doesn't always defeat imposter syndrome. It just doesn't. Sometimes the success happens and you are instantly besieged with a bunch of other doubts about how that success came to be, and whether that, you're further down the rabbit hole in terms of your imposterness, if that makes sense. Um, because of that success, you feel like it's a new thing. Like, I'm successful in this, and people know that I can do this, and so now they're going to start asking me to do it. And maybe somewhere along the line, I somebody's not pleased with my work. Now, I may have done this 170,000 times before, but this one person not being pleased with my work, I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. That's the challenge. Again, I talked about it on previous episodes. My negative critic is the most negative person I've ever met. They're the meanest person I've ever met. They say the nastiest things to me. Um, and it's all internal. It all comes from the inside, and inside out. And so, it's hard sometimes it is hard to ignore that, especially when you're a negative inner critic. It's 2 or 3 in the morning, and your negative inner critic's yelling at you because you've been sleeping too long and you got other stuff that needs to get done, or you've been working on multiple projects for your businesses and other businesses around the clock for the last 48 hours, and you decide to take a couple of hours off. The negative inner critic is yelling at you like, what are you doing? You got this stuff to get done. You don't deserve rest. You don't deserve quiet time. You got to get this thing done. You got to turn this stuff out. And so that's the challenge, y'all. And it's not easy. It's not always easy. It's not, like I said, it's one of those things where it's tough because it's not necessarily defeated with um it's not defeated with success. When you constantly believe that you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, success isn't the thing that ends it. Sometimes it can exacerbate things and make things a lot more difficult. And you try your best, but having success can set you up for even more complex feelings of anxiety and stuff. And so, you know, it's one thing to be aware of it, and it's another thing to address it, and it's another thing to learn how to function with it. And so I have been aware of the imposter syndrome issues for a long time. And I've learned how I deal with them. Um, and I've kind of addressed them, but the toughest part is I'm still dealing with, because just because you have the knowledge on how to navigate that sphere in your life doesn't mean that it's always going to be 100% easy for you to navigate that sphere in your life. So maybe that's what I'm trying, maybe that's the point I'm trying to get to. The awareness is great, knowing what to do is great, and the application is great, but that still doesn't make it any easier to deal with. So for those that aren't keeping up, imposter syndrome, the way I describe it is the nagging inner voice that tells me that constantly everything I'm doing is gonna fall to ash, and we're just waiting on that call or that one event, that one domino that falls over that completely exposes me as a complete fraud. Like, it's the constant fear that that's going to happen, even though it's unwarranted. It's a constant fear that that's going to happen out there. And so when you encounter difficulties in life or difficulties in business, that voice gets louder and louder. Um, and so it's because I don't necessarily mind critics, um, but they can compound the voice that my inner critic is having, and it can kind of magnify it and make it a little bit louder. And so it creates where you're just constantly mentally uncomfortable and not settled where you're at. Mm, it is what it is. You just learn how to adjust to it the best way you can, and understand that a lot of times it's BS. A lot of times it's BS, or sometimes it is something that you're not 100% focusing on, and you need to call yourself out and check yourself on some things. I've gotten feedback about, you know, um, a lot of different things in my life. Most recently, it's you know, always, it always walking in a couple minutes late at a meeting or an event, and a lot of times that's kind of a rebellion thing because my old world I always had to be there 5 or 10 minutes early, and I kind of prided myself on it. And so when I left corporate and started working for myself, I decided to run on my own clock. That's not ideal for everybody, and it's not ideal for most situations, and I need to correct it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm working on it. Um, so that's kind of what imposter syndrome is. It's always feeling like that other shoe is just waiting to drop on you. And never really being able to quite enjoy what it is. And it's specifically for me, it's the fear of being exposed as a fraud or an imposter. And the crazy part is, and I've said it before, um, bullshit artists don't deal with imposter syndrome like this. Because they don't really feel any accountability for the outcomes that associating with them will produce. They don't feel accountable for any of that stuff, and so they can look you in the face and sell you a product that they know will not work. And well, it's on you. You should have done more research, or you didn't do it right, or whatever. But they always have a reason why they're not accountable for the outcomes. Me, I feel like I'm accountable for things that I feel accountability for things that I have no control over, which is crazy. But it plays into that complex narrative. And it does go back to some self-esteem things. It comes back to some developmental things. It goes back to, you know, ADHD. It goes back to a little bit of autism. It goes back to a lot of different things that I have going on of the cocktail that's brewing that's inside me that not the whole world is aware of. It's no excuse, it's no reason, but it does give me reason for different things that I do. Okay. Um, Imposter syndrome hits people that are high achievers because the higher you go up the mountain, the further you feel like you have to fall. That's the only way I can describe it. The higher you climb, the further it feels like you can possibly fall. And so, imposter syndrome does impact people that are high achievers. Um, that's the challenge. It it absolutely does. And that's what I'm saying. It's not defeated with accomplishments. Sometimes accomplishments put you higher and higher on the plateau, and you in your mind are like, okay, you're not enjoying the skyline that's in front of you and the fact that you're in new territory. You're looking behind you and seeing how far you have to fall. That's the scary part of it. It's not easy. And so high achievers really do get hit by it because when you are a high achiever, you're rubbing elbows with other high achievers. And so, I can imagine you're a millionaire sitting in a room with a bunch of multimillionaires, and your $1 million separates you from 90% of the population. But there's that 1% where you're still small potatoes to them. You're still small change to them. And so you're never going to be able to catch up to them. I know I've heard YouTubers discuss it too. Even as they build their channels bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, there's always like a Mr. Beast out there with like 90 million subscribers or some crazy number like that they're never going to reach. Some number that you can't even conceptualize in your brain, in your human brain. You can't even wrap your mind around the numbers that he's doing. You always feel like you're in competition with that, and you're not, because you're still more successful than 80, 90, 99% of the other people that are doing the same thing you're doing, but you're constantly looking at that 1%. It's not easy. So that's the challenge. And I don't have clean answers on how to address this stuff, y'all. Only thing I do is tell you what I do. And for me, it's looking that imposter syndrome in the face. Sometimes it's looking myself in the mirror and addressing my inner critic and saying, "You're full of shit. I'm going to go do it anyway. And I'm going to see what happens." That's how I address it. I wish I had a book of mantras that I could give you, book of chants or meditations or anything like that. I don't have it. Mine is tied to, okay, well, my inner critic saying, I'm not good enough to do this thing, so I need to go prove it wrong. And I need to keep proving it wrong every single time I try it, because one success isn't enough, because it'll still be like, well, you got it this one time, but next time it's going to screw up. And so you're constantly having to prove it wrong. And eventually it will relent, in my experience, at least. Sometimes they'll come back. It's that, when you're trying the extinction principle. Sometimes you'll have an extinction burst. This is the old behavioralist stuff coming out. Sometimes you have an extinction burst, like when you were trying to stop doing a behavior. Sometimes, as a response, your brain and body engage in that behavior hardcore to make it so that you can't add a new behavior to it. So if you're trying to um, stop biting your fingernails. Let's say you want to stop biting. You're making an effort to stop biting your fingernails, and you swear off of it. But then something stressful happens, and you're just down in the nubs. You're just That's the extinction burst. Your body's trying to get back to that what's regular for it. That regular part of it. And so it's not always easy. And sometimes even with imposter syndrome, there's this weird almost extinction burst kind of thing. Like, you thought that you had this part licked, you thought you had it accomplished, and you thought you had completely silenced it. All of a sudden, one thing goes wrong or something happens in the world, and now that inner critic is screaming at you, and you just got to be ready to deal with it. You got to know that inner critic is a liar. And what the inner critic is really trying to do is, at the end of the day, it's still self-preservation. It's trying to preserve you. Um, it's trying to keep you from taking a risk that could damage you mentally or physically or whatever. It's trying to protect you. And in my mind, at least, and I could be wrong, in my mind, it's almost an overactive sense of self-protection. You know, People in relationships, sometimes if they've had struggles in interpersonal relationships, they will do things to self-sabotage good relationships. Where I'm not talking about just romantic, I'm talking about friends or family and stuff. If they've had issues with it, when they're forming new relationships with people, they will do little bits of self-sabotage because the inner voice is telling them they're not worthy of love or worthy of that stuff. And so it will it will try to bring back what's normal to them, which is struggled and failed relationships. And it ends up becoming this weird self-fulfilling prophecy. Stop me if I'm getting too a little bit too in the weeds on this. I'm really trying not to, but that's where it goes. And so that's where the challenge is for me. It's really finding that happy place where I can really bask in my successes and feel like I've earned them. And that's actually a goal where I can look back on something I've accomplished and be really, really proud of it. And the only things I can 100% say that are, I mean, with my career in with kids, working with kids and families, I'm proud of that. Um, I'm proud of my marriage. I'm proud of being to the best of my abilities. And I'm learning to embrace being a business owner that where I'm really proud of the businesses that I'm associated with. I'm proud of the work that we've done with Coach Mo Athletics, because there were times where we didn't know whether this thing was going to last. And a lot of it was built on the fact that we got a building the first time, in the building we couldn't do anything that we wanted to or anything that we needed to grow our business in that building. And I took it hard because I really picked that building out. And so when it was time to move on and say this isn't working, I took that as a personal thing. Like, I screwed this up. And so it's amazing to actually have the facility that we want and the facility of our dreams, and one that we're looking to expand and add more services into. It's almost like it's this weird haze of disbelief where it doesn't seem real. And I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it's an accomplishment nonetheless. And I'm trying to stand with my chest out and being really happy with that. And so that's where it is, y'all. Um, it's not always easy. It's not always an easy thing. And it does require some radical, radical self-acceptance. And sometimes self-acceptance is a radical behavior. It's not always easy, y'all. Um, you know, and sometimes you have here's the weird part about imposter syndrome. I'm gonna be honest with you. Sometimes you have to actually believe the good things that people tell you about yourself. I know that's wild. The fact that I actually have to believe that people like when people praise you, that is a real thing, and it's and that you actually deserve it, and that's them not just not knowing who you are or not seeing you at your worst. It's really coming from a place of, I'm really impressed with this person. It's wild. It's wild to hear other people discuss things that I do and being proud of things that I've accomplished and being proud for me. I still I still struggle with that sometimes because I'm mentally it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it. Um, so that's what it is. Anyway, for the business owner specifically, imposter syndrome isn't always beaten with accomplishments. It can compound the issue. Um, your negative inner critic is just trying to protect you in a lot of senses. It's overactive self-protection. So it's trying to get you back into this weird, it's trying to get you back. I mean, I don't want to get too scientifical because scientifical. I don't want to get too scientific with it because these are all just personal observations. But um, your body's trying to get back to this homeostasis kind of thing, this normal state. And sometimes being happy or pleased with your success and not being anxious is not a normal state for you. I know it's not for me. Not being anxious about something isn't normal for me. And it can create anxiety that I'm not anxious. Like, what am I not paying attention to? What am I not focusing on? What's this monster that's under the bed that's going to come and grab me and snatch me under? And so it's just your body's almost over self protection, which is wild to me. So, um, so for business owners, the first part is being aware of it and being aware that sometimes you can just say, hey guys, I'm really being hard on myself. And sometimes even having that self-talk, I'm really being super hard on myself and it's not warranted and it's not necessary. And it's something that um, it's BS. It's my mind latching on and attaching itself to this idea because it's trying to warn me that the wheels are going to fall off of this thing at any time. You have to be aware of what's happening. If you experience a success in your job or your work life or your business life or your personal life, and the next thing you are filled with this existential sense of dread that it's all going to go away the next minute, then you might be dealing with some of that imposter syndrome and the negative inner critic. And it's being aware of it because that's the first step. If you're not aware it's going to happen, you're going to think that it's a normal experience, and it's really not. It's disproportional. So that's the advice I can give you. Um, you know, if you want to step out into the business owner world, it's a little bit harder because sometimes those anxious feelings, those negative gut feelings are things that you really probably should be giving some credence to and listening to. Because it could, if you're not 100% on a deal, or I don't even like to say 100%, if you're not, 50% on a deal, or you have something that you feel like you haven't been monitoring in your business and it keeps you up at night, you probably need to put some kind of system in place to monitor that thing and check for that outcome, because that's probably a good sense that there's a blind spot in your business that you're not aware of. I knew specifically in, it wasn't like a crystal ball or anything, but pre-pandemic, in those months leading up to it, we were sitting there kind of watching where this thing was going, and we're like, I don't think this thing is abating, and I don't think it's slowing down. We need to start coming up with some other plans in case some stuff has to change. We didn't know the scope of things that were going to change, but we had to put a plan in place so that we could adjust for the blind spot that the pandemic was, because that was a global blind spot. Nobody was necessarily ready for the whole planet to shut down for 18 months. You don't plan. There's no way you can plan for that. And even, I would even say, even doomsday preppers were kind of befuddled, like, whoa, I didn't really expect this to happen. They were a little bit more prepared, but they didn't really expect the scope of what was going to happen. And so it is one of those things where it can be something that's real that you're responding to. And the harder part is when you're dealing with the business, or even any job where you are responsible for your own leads and your own income, if you're in sales or something like that. And even nowadays, with all these layoffs that are happening, being able to read the room a little bit, sometimes that little bit of anxiousness is something that you do need to take heed of and make sure that you're putting a plan and a contingency plan in place to address it. So I don't want to say that it's 100% imposter syndrome or 100% negative inner critic and stuff like that, and you're just worrying for nothing. Sometimes you do need to put a plan in place to address the worry. But if you put the plan in place and you're still worrying about the same thing, then that might be a little bit of a disproportional response. Forgive me if I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm jumping. I'm kind of going back through my notes to make sure I hit the places I want to hit. I would say, I talk about radical self-acceptance. How about some radical compassion for yourself? Where, I would love to be able to take a full day off and be like, yeah, I deserve it, and not feel like the scum of the earth because I decided to take some time. But that's something I'm working towards. It's a goal I actually set for myself, to be able to not necessarily work, because I mean, it's a hard thing because I enjoy working. I do. It doesn't bother me. Um, I enjoy editing videos and shooting podcasts and things along those lines. I actually enjoy it. And sometimes it's a way to blow off steam because I can kind of shut my brain off and focus on the stuff that I like to do. And so I'm not where I'm death on working all the time. But there are times where, it would be nice to be able to completely unplug to a degree and not feel like I'm going to come back to a four alarm fire. And I think that may come from casework and managing shelters and stuff like that, because typically that's what the experience was. I was the director. If I took time off, I was going to walk into a circus. No matter how much I prepared for it, there's always an element where you're walking back into a circus, no matter much you pre-work you do with the staff, and laying out plans and stuff. There's always stuff that you got to come back to, or there's a mountain of paperwork you got to get done. With casework, I was working, when I was a caseworker, I was working from the delivery room. And this is the tough part. I was working from the delivery room and it was expected. And I didn't see that as toxic at the time, but golly, that was really, really bad. Um, and that ability not to turn off or being turning off and it resulting in negative outcomes when you come back, that is a real thing. And I think maybe that might come from, 20, 25 years in fields where you couldn't walk away. You were always on call. I don't know. But I would love to be able to, maybe the radical self-compassion is setting goals for yourself to be nice to yourself. You know, I used to force my staff to do unscheduling where they would sit down with a calendar and make sure that they schedule their days off and protect those days off and never schedule any work thing on those days off. Because then it was easier to put the rest of their schedule together. Is nope, you're off on Wednesdays. You don't touch this on you don't touch this on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, I know that your phone calls need to be routed to me or one of your partners in the field. But Wednesdays, you're not here. You're off. You're gone. And so I'm not expecting any calls from you or anything. And you need to build that into what your families are on Wednesdays between this time and this time. All their calls need to go to this person. I would make my staff to do that. I never did it myself. And I think there's a level of this weird self-sacrifice thing where you feel like you got to sacrifice yourself when you're doing the imposter syndrome thing, because you almost have to sacrifice your needs and wants on the altar, to please others. I'm not going to jump into all that stuff because I think it's kind of beyond the scope of this video. Yeah, I have a really supportive environment. And a supportive business partner, supportive wife. My kids understand. It's not always easy to explain to people that aren't in the mix. It's really hard as a business owner, to be honest with you, to talk to people that don't know what you're talking about. I don't know the stress of it. Not knowing, where you're responsible for your checks coming in. That's a different thing, man. And people don't necessarily know what that's like. Yeah, you may have a hard job. I've had difficult, mentally taxing jobs. But it's nothing like, okay, you're responsible for your next paycheck. Go out there and get it. And then you got to go get another one and another one. And it doesn't always cleanly align with what your expenses are. So you have to account for overhead. You have to account for the cost of doing business, services, internet, car, all this other stuff that goes into it that you have to account for when you are doing your pricing stuff. And it's hard, and so it's nice to have people in my circle that really have walked that entrepreneurial lifestyle, and can actually discuss it, because it's not always easy to discuss with people that haven't really done it before. So here I am. I just overshared a ton. So I'm asking if you guys have any comments or anything, go ahead and post them, and let me know kind of what your experiences are, or if you like this kind of content. If you like this kind of content, if you're watching, give me a like and let me know that this is the kind of stuff that you want to see from me. And I will make an effort to do more of these kind of transparent ones and not just talk about general topics. But, give me a like and let me know that this is stuff that you want to hear about, because it does matter to me. I want to be able to create stuff that is going to benefit other people, and not necessarily, be the boilerplate kind of social media rah-rah, motivational / inspirational / educational content that's out there. I want to talk about real things. I want to talk about imposter syndrome. I want to talk about failing even though you tried your best. I want to talk about what the sides of business that people don't tell you about, and how it's not always easy. I do like to talk about things where it is a little, your mindset has to change a bit when you become a business owner. Maybe even talk about the difference that I've experienced working jobs where I was my own director. I was the director, and so I didn't really have a ton of oversight, and how that's not necessarily the same thing as running your own business. And so I want to have these conversations, because I feel like specifically online, in this online space, we get sold a bill of goods in a lot of senses. When entrepreneurs post snippets of their life. It's always they're on some beach or doing something amazing, and they don't talk about the late nights and early mornings and sitting around the table just fretting about what's going to happen next. They don't really talk about that kind of stuff. They show you all the great stuff. And so I want to create a space where we talk about the stuff that the actual human experience of doing this thing. So the only way I'm going to know it is if you guys like it and let me know that this is the stuff, or comment and let me know that you're with this kind of stuff. So that's what I got, y'all. Again, if you're interested in being a guest on the Unstuck sessions, or maybe we can sit down and discuss area of business that you were stuck with, whether it's business or marketing, or anything that any kind of normal sticking point that you come up with as a business owner. I'd love to have that conversation with you and talk about what your journey was. I'd also like to be able to do a live Unstuck session where we bring real problems and discuss them online with the hopes of helping other business owners. Um, you know, I don't know what we would call it. Um, I know that, there's all kinds of different things like masterminds and all this other stuff. And maybe it would be an online kind of mastermind thing where business owners, inspiring business owners, can get in and talk about the different struggles. And, we just have real live conversations to help each other out. I'd have to structure that a little bit differently, but I would love to do it. So these are the different areas that I want to get into. I do feel more confident and more comfortable um, sharing information and teaching people. And so that's the direction that I do want to go with the online content. It's just figuring out the best message to get out there and get it in front of people. So that's all I have. If you're interested in those things, I'll put up the email address again. Where are we at? If you want to get unstuck, hit me up at mail@isellwords.net and schedule a consultation, or a consultation for a podcast, or however you want to do it. I want to hear from you, and we can kind of sit down and figure out what this looks like together. That's all I got. And I will be documenting my journey and checking in as the year progresses with the imposter syndrome thing. So I may be in a completely different place next time I do this. But again, it was a big thing for me to hop online and big up myself in terms of, being on the board, being the newest member of the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and really having a fully fleshed out facility, training facility that we've built through our blood, sweat, and tears. So, I did have to big myself up for that one. And it's not necessarily comfortable because I'm still kind of freaking out about the fact that I still had, I put that out there. So that's all I got. I will holler at y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to y'all later. Peace.